For over 1,000 years, there's been this other way of reading the Bible, a method that a lot of mainstream traditions have kind of overlooked. So today, we're going to dive into this ancient approach, the Karaite way of reading Scripture, and you'll see it offers a perspective that feels surprisingly fresh.
So let's just start with a really big question. What if the Bible's most powerful messages aren't buried deep in some complex code, but are actually just sitting there right on the surface, hidden in plain sight? What if, for centuries, all the layers of commentary and interpretation haven't been helping us see clearly, but have actually been covering the original message up?
And that really gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? It's all about how we read. Every tradition, every denomination has its own lens that it looks through to see the text. And, understanding that lens is really the first step to understanding anything else. Okay, let's break this down. We're looking at two totally different starting blocks here. On one side, you have traditions like Rabbinic Judaism or many Christian denominations that lean heavily on established interpretations, things like the Talmud or specific church doctrines. But Karaite Judaism, it says, hold on, let's go back to square one. The whole goal is to return directly to the text itself and try to hear what it's saying in the most straightforward way possible. Now, and this is a really important point. This isn't about just tossing all tradition out the window. It's not about rejection for rejection's sake. Think of it more like an archaeological dig. The goal is to carefully, gently brush away the centuries of dust and commentary that have built up so we can see the original structure underneath. It's really all about rediscovery. So, how do they actually do this? What's the method? Well, the key to the whole thing is a principle, a specific way of reading, known by the Hebrew term peshat. And this idea is the absolute core of the Karaite approach. So what is peshat? Honestly, it's pretty simple. It just means the plain, direct, and contextual meaning of the text. It's a commitment to always start with the most straightforward understanding you can get before you start jumping to symbolic or mystical interpretations. It's really about letting the text itself have the first word. And this isn't just some vague philosophy. It's a real, practical, four-step process. First, you have to start with the absolute basics, the grammar of the original Hebrew. Then, you zoom out. What's the historical situation here? Who was this written to and why? Next, you look at its immediate neighborhood. What are the verses right before and after it's saying? And finally, and this is a big one, you treat the Bible like this huge, interconnected document, and you check how the same words and phrases are used in other parts of Scripture. At the end of the day, what this all boils down to is the idea that the Bible is its own best commentary. Instead of reaching for an external guide first, the peshat method assumes that the text can be used to interpret the text. A tricky word in Leviticus might become crystal clear when you see how it's used in the book of Isaiah. It's all one coherent, self-referential system. Okay, that's the theory. But how does this actually play out in the real world? Let's get practical and look at a couple of famous biblical puzzles to see how this approach can lead to some really elegant and sometimes surprising solutions. Let's start with a classic, an eye for an eye. Now, the common rabbinic reading interprets this to mean monetary compensation. If you injure someone, you pay them for their loss. But the Karaite reading says, let's take it at face value, but, and this is crucial, let's understand it within its original ancient legal context. In that world, it was a principle of equal justice, not a blank check for revenge. The context defines everything. Here's another amazing example, the calendar. Rabbinic Judaism uses a fixed calendar, all calculated out mathematically years in advance. But the Karaite approach, trying to follow biblical commands like observe the month of Aviv, relies on direct physical observation. That means actually going out and sighting the new crescent moon and literally checking the state of the barley harvest in Israel. It creates this living, dynamic calendar that's tied to the real world, to the land and the seasons. And this is where it gets really cool. This intense focus on the original Hebrew uncovers these incredible layers of meaning that we just completely miss in translation. For instance, in English we say praise, but biblical Hebrew has at least 7 different words, each with its own unique flavor. Or think about the difference between the word bara, to create something from absolutely nothing, and asa, to fashion something out of materials that already exist. Little distinctions like that can totally change how you read a story like Genesis 1. But this whole approach isn't just for, academics and scholars sitting in a library. It actually does something radical. It shifts the focus and puts the power of interpretation right into the hands of the individual reader. It all comes down to this one simple, powerful motto: search well in Scripture. I mean, just think about what that says. And what it doesn't say,
It doesn't say listen well to the authorities or accept the established tradition. No, it's a direct command to you to actively search for yourself.
And that's huge, right? The implication is just profound. It empowers every single person to have a direct relationship with the text. Sure, guidance from teachers is valuable, but at the end of the day, the responsibility and the privilege of understanding rests with the reader. It basically democratizes the whole process of interpretation.
So, what you get is this incredible sense that wisdom isn't some ancient secret that was figured out once and then locked away in a book. Instead, it's something that's alive, something that's meant to be continually rediscovered by every new person and every new generation that comes to the text with fresh eyes. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all interesting history, but why does a thousand-year-old method matter now? Well, it turns out this ancient approach has some seriously useful lessons, some important correctives for anyone reading the Bible today. Think of it like this. This method gives us a set of guardrails for our own study. It helps stop us from accidentally reading our modern ideas back into an ancient text. It forces us to draw a clear line between what's actually in the Bible and what traditions came along later. And by doing that, it preserves the unique historical world of the scriptures, and amazingly, it often reveals just how internally consistent the text really is. I think this is the most powerful takeaway. With this approach, the Bible isn't treated like some fragile artifact in a museum that you can only look at from behind glass. No, it's treated like a living voice, one that can still speak with incredible clarity and power if we're willing to listen to it on its own terms. So this leaves all of us with a really practical challenge, almost like a purity test for how we read. The next time you're studying a passage, just stop and ask yourself, is my understanding honestly coming from the words on the page, or am I bringing my own idea to the page and kind of making the words fit what I already believe? And that's really the big question I want to leave you with. It doesn't matter if you're a person of faith or just someone with historical curiosity. What could you discover? What hidden wisdom is just sitting there, waiting for you, if you just gave the text a chance to speak for itself?